Welcome to the Ancestral Cure podcast. I'm your host, Julian, and I'm here to guide you through the fascinating realm of holistic health. Join us as we bridge ancient wisdom with modern science to help you achieve optimal health, reclaim your vitality, and unlock your body's true potential. Welcome, everyone, to my very first episode of my podcast. Um, for my first episode, I'm so excited to have a very special guest with me. She is a holistic health coach, practitioner, educator, and speaker. Kiera, thank you so much for coming on. How are you?
I'm good, thanks. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to chat today.
Yeah, it's great because I've followed you for about 9 months now, and I've learned so much from you. And you were sort of one of the first accounts that got me into the whole quantum circadian health space, which I feel like it's such a niche community. So yeah, it's great to have you on, and I'd love for you to tell our listeners a bit about your background, your story, health journey, what sort of led you into studying all of these concepts in circadian or quantum health, if you will.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you on all of those points. Uh, I mean, it's been actually, I'm kind of nervous. It's been so long since I've done a podcast, probably like a good 6 months. My story. So I came from a very centralized background. So I'm Australian, if you can't tell from my
Mhm.
fantastic accent. I grew up in Southeast Queensland on a cattle and bean farm. Always out in the sun, always super healthy. My goal in life was to go to university, to get a good degree, to study medicine, to have the white picket fence, the car, and be quote unquote successful, because that's what success is sold to us through the centralized system as. And yeah, so through my own health journey, I realized that that's probably not the way that I should be or I really want to live my life. So I studied psychology and then I went on to study registered nursing. I left that over COVID. So I left the end of that degree. And around that same time, I guess COVID woke a lot of people up, but I actually had moved from the Sunshine Coast because I got a scholarship to attend a university in the city. And so this was the first time that I was living in a city, which means that, I mean, it's a big difference growing up on a farm to living in a city. And I guess my environment changed so much and I became so unwell, but I didn't understand why. So I went from being never even thinking about health or poor health because it was something that I just always had was great health. And I became so unwell. So I was suffering with chronic vertigo. I was diagnosed with PCOS symptoms. I had cysts. I was having really painful menstrual cycles, which it sounds really bad to say, but I thought that like a menstrual pain or ovulation pain was something that women just made up to get time off work because I just never had that in my life. It was so easeful. And then when I moved to the city, I thought, oh, this is what everyone's complaining about. And yeah, I was basically in so much pain every day, waking up and just having such heavy dizzy spells and so much vertigo. It would just be not uncommon for me just to faint.
Mm.
Um, I would just be crying in the shower before work, before university, because I was so exhausted. I had such severe chronic fatigue.
Mhm.
And I tried everything. I was asking all my professors at university, what should I do? They told me to go vegan. My symptoms got worse, no
Mm.
surprise. Um, I was exercising more, going to the gym, exhausting myself even more, and nothing was working. My health just started going downhill. And then at this point, I thought medicine was fantastic. I thought that doctors knew everything, that pharmaceuticals were the best thing ever. They saved so many lives, and they do. But now I look at it a bit differently. And so I posted on social media and I thought, I'm going to have to see a naturopath or a natural physician. And I came across the work of Dr. Corey Gandavini, and he messaged me and kind of said to me, like, hey, Kira, it's not you that's broken, it's your environment. And I thought, what is this acupuncturist talking about? My environment. How can that possibly be impacting my health? But then he kind of wiped my eyes clean and sent me some voice notes and explained to me, you need to watch the sunrise, you need to get grounded, you need to get outside in nature. And then when I started doing these things in just a few days, I couldn't believe how much better I felt. So my brain fog was going. I could actually wake up with energy. I actually couldn't believe how quick the turnaround was from chronic fatigue, crying in the shower, can't concentrate, no motivation, to actually having energy, getting out of bed, being happy and being excited about life again. Um, and so that was around the same time COVID was happening. And I remember like looking in the hospitals and looking in the wards and just thinking, if all of this is true that I'm learning about health and our natural environment matters and radiation makes us sick and artificial blue light's bad for our health and causes all these adverse conditions, the whole hospital is wrong. The way that everything's set up is not optimal for healing. And we really need to redesign the facilities to be conducive for good health. And so it was around that time that I decided that I didn't know what my future would hold, but I couldn't be just another person in the system doing the
Mhm.
exact same thing. And so I decided to study what I was learning. So I was reading peer-reviewed articles, I was listening to other researchers in the field, taking short courses from different people that I really looked up to and was inspired by. And 3 years later, 4 years later, I guess I'm here and I have my own health coaching business, which is exciting. I've spoken at several events all across the globe. I left my country and I get to do what I love every single day. And so that is my story.
That's really inspiring, actually, because I know a lot of people who they might suffer from health issues, but they've tried everything. They just can't figure out a way. They've not actually heard an alternative perspective when it comes to circadian health or alternative medicine. So I think it's great that you've found this alternative and you've created such a big platform from it. Um, I'd love to follow up on what you said about the problems of hospitals because this is something that really like resonates with me. When you look at the hospitals and they're filled with artificial blue light and the food that they're feeding them at their vending machines, it's just completely backwards. So, and a lot of the radiation devices, and it is necessary sometimes, but I'd love for you to speak a bit more about why that's not such a good thing.
Yeah, very good points. The light is such a big problem, and the food as well. I think the light is such a big leap for people to start to understand, but I think people are starting to understand
Mhm.
nutrition. And even when you look at the food that patients are being fed, it's not even visually appetizing, let alone full of nutrients. It's like we're overfed but undernourished, and that couldn't be more the case. Um, so yeah, I mean we could go so many places with this, but I guess everything is a cost benefit ratio. So, for example, if I have broken my leg and I obviously want to utilize modern medicine, I'm in an acute injury state. So, being around some artificial light for a couple of days so that I can be around doctors that are going to look after my leg and monitor my observations, I think that the benefit from that is probably far greater than the risk, which is some circadian disruption, maybe some
Mhm.
radiation exposure. But then when you start to look at things that are more chronic, like cancer or Alzheimer's, and this is not medical advice, by the way,
Mhm.
please seek the advice of your healthcare physicians or GP before making any changes to your healthcare routine. This is purely for educational purposes only. When you start to understand how light can actually, I guess, cause these symptoms to not only manifest in the first place, but actually rapidly increase in severity,
Mhm.
you start to ask the question, is the exposure to these things more of a risk than it is a benefit? And in most cases, it is more of a risk than it is a benefit. I mean, if someone has an illness such as cancer, where apoptosis is broken, which means that you're not be able to take out all of those bad cells in your body. Cancer cells defy that process. Then being around artificial light and not sleeping and being woken up every 2 hours to have your observations taken, which in itself, even without the artificial light exposure, keeping you awake and skyrocketing your cortisol, is going to impede on these cellular repair processes. And so you have to beg the question, is the risk outweighing the benefit?
Mhm.
Is the benefit outweighing the risk? And the answer to me is like, no, it's not. And although there are conditions where being woken every 2 hours and being around blue light can be extremely helpful, sometimes it isn't. Um, and now there's a bunch of studies coming out too to support things like the radiation from all of the equipment inside the hospital rooms, alongside the windows that block this infrared light spectrum that has been found to be super healing for our body, to even just the chemicals in the water that people are being fed when they're in the hospital. All of these things combined are just a toxic soup and it's not really optimal health. And I have spoken to some doctors about this and some of my colleagues, and they say, well, it's free healthcare, it's public
Mm.
healthcare. That's what people have access to. It's all that our community can afford. And I think that that's okay. But the thing that's missing is informed consent. So you actually have to tell someone, because me, as a student in school or a nursing placement, or even just me as a patient in the hospital, which I have been, I wasn't told this isn't optimal health. Like,
Mm.
this is where you go to heal. But I wasn't told that, hey, if you can't get your own water, which is actually better for your health, you can have ours. Or you should get someone to bring you in food because this nutrition actually isn't. This is all we can give you. It's not optimal though. If I had someone to tell me that, then that would be informed consent, but it's not. We're just told
Mm.
that this is the best place for healing. And so I think a lot of changes need to be put in place, but yeah. Is there anything you wanted me to delve into specifically?
Well, I think that's such a good point when you look at how, for example, like what happens when they wake patients up every 2 hours to check their oxygen levels.
Yeah, exactly. So, obviously to repair, someone's listening to this, to get rid of I don't know, any inflammation, like let's just say inflammation, blanket statement, repairing cells, we're setting ourselves up for the next day, priming our body to run well the next day. We're hitting the factory reset button on our body. We do that when we sleep. And so if you're unwell, chances are you do need a lot of sleep, and you need deep quality sleep because not all sleep's the same.
Mm.
And so to get into certain states, to get into certain brain waves and hit different repair processes in the body, we actually have to have like 7, 6, 8 hours of uninterrupted sleep in a good environment, for us to actually heal. And so when we're being woken up every 2 hours, I mean, I don't know who would even feel good when they're healthy, being
Mm.
woken up every 2 hours. There's a reason that mothers, when they have a child, they're so exhausted all the time, because it's not that they're not getting sleep, they're not just getting consecutive sleep, right? Because they're up breastfeeding all the time. So it's the same situation, but like just a bit different. Um, so for example, cancer patients being woken up every 2 hours to have their observations taken, it's interrupting their sleep. So they're not healing, they're not running those repair processes. Not only this, but they're also having artificial blue light shined in their eyes and on their skin. And now we know that circadian rhythm matters a lot, and it's actually controlled by the light in our environment. Predominantly, that's the Zeitgeber that our body prioritizes. And so, naturally speaking, our world before the invention of artificial lighting was always governed by these light and dark cycles. And so when the day ends and the light changes from the sun, like it is right now, it's this
Yeah.
beautiful red out. It's telling my body, like, hey, it's time for Kiera to go to sleep. She needs to get ready to run her nightly repair cycles, hit that factory reset button, and then it's dark, right? And then I'm asleep. My body's sensing that. I have photoreceptors in my skin and in my eyes as well. And it's sensing it's dark, it's dark, it's time to sleep, time to repair. Then when that sun rises the next morning, my body senses that, it spikes cortisol. A couple other things will spike cortisol too. It has a really good rhythm. So even if you're around darkness, you will actually see it peak in the morning regardless. But over time, that will taper off. But so we can see the light in our environment is actually controlling our ability to repair. Now, if you're unwell in the hospital, you're having all this blue light shine on your skin, it's going to impede that process as well as keep you awake and stimulated as well. And it's going to deplete melatonin in your body,
Mm.
which not only is that a regulator of our sleep, we all know, all the children across the globe are taking melatonin so that they actually feel sleepy. Um, but it's also a master antioxidant. And people love to bang on about taking vitamin C. Vitamin C is an antioxidant, and it is. But to put this into perspective, melatonin as an antioxidant, just one molecule of melatonin can counteract 10 reactive oxygen species, so 10 little balls of inflammation, versus vitamin C, which can only counteract 3 reactive oxygen
Mm.
species. And we get melatonin for free. It's produced in our body all the time, not only from our pineal gland to regulate our circadian rhythm, but also locally as well from the mitochondria themselves. Now, so I think that's like a 4 times more effective than vitamin C as an antioxidant. Melatonin as well also promotes other antioxidant enzymes such as glutathione, which can then go on to counteract ROS itself. So when you add that in, it's just like the best antioxidant.
Mm.
And most people, they're missing out on that every night because they're not sleeping in darkness. They're not getting outside during the day so they can do the melatonin conversion they need to do. Um, and they're around all these artificial lights before they go to sleep. Now, if you're thinking of someone that's actually sick, so this is somebody who um, isn't in optimal health and they need to prioritize sleep even more than the normal person. They need to prioritize antioxidants more than the normal person. They're actually doing the exact opposite by being woken up every 2 hours and being around all this artificial
Mm.
light. And I just wonder what would happen for people's health and, the decrease in post-op remissions that would happen or the improvement in recovery speed that we would see in patients in hospitals if we actually did honor the circadian rhythm in the hospital environment.
That's such a good point, honestly. And it doesn't have to be this way because if you look at hospitals back in the day, they had their patients would sleep on the rooftops to get sunlight, right? And
Mhm.
we'd have like solariums where the window wasn't blocking UV light, and we had like trees and everything. So it's just crazy how we've gone so far from that. But what would you say is the biggest difference between the conventional medicine approach versus more of the alternative holistic root cause approach? Yeah.
Great question. I would say that the biggest difference is preventative versus curative.
Mm.
And so hospitals and healthcare is generally something that you access once you're sick. And so you're born, and unless you're born with an illness or you have a family member that's ill, you don't really have much to do with health. Like you don't really learn about it anywhere. It's just something that you have until you don't have it. And then you don't have it, and then you go search for a curative approach, which often comes in a bottle or a syringe, and you're told that your body's broken, it's just genetics. Here's something that can fix you. Your body isn't capable of doing what it's designed to do. And for women, it's your body isn't capable of being fertile. For men, it's chronic fatigue is normal,
Mhm.
depression is normal. Here's a pill. Whereas the holistic health uh, community, and again, there is a big difference in quality with practitioners from one to the next in the space because there is many people in it. But I mean, you being on the X community, you're surrounded by fantastic people there, like Andra and
Mhm.
what's his name, the nutritional analytics guy. Um, they're also fantastic.
Mhm.
They come from the approach of your body is not broken, but perhaps the signal that tells your body what to do and the instructions that tells your body what to do is broken. And so from I guess, a holistic alternative standpoint, uh, for the quantum health community, that light is instructions and light is actually telling your body how to function. Just like you buy a flat pack from IKEA and you look at it, you're like, I don't know how to put this together. I actually do need to read the
Mhm.
instructions. And then you can turn something that's flat into something that's 3D and something that's useful. And that's how light really works with our biology. It's constantly downloading instructions and changing our neurotransmitters, changing our biology. And when we separate from that, our body is searching for answers. It's searching for its instructions. It wants to be good. It innately wants to heal and be healthy and be its most optimal self, but it doesn't have the resources to do so. Now, not only is the light a big problem and our instruction manual is not there, but we also have such a toxic burden of heavy metals as well through intergenerational um, exposures from mother to child. But we also are living lives indoors devoid of the infrared light. We're also overfed and undernourished, meaning that like I'm eating boxes and boxes of shapes, but like
Mhm.
where's actually the nutrients in that? We not want a single thing, but yet we're so unhealthy. And so we're really looking from an alternative standpoint, how can we optimize the input signals to the biology? How can we decrease these toxins exposures, whether that be through air pollution, food pollution? And at times, yeah, it is supplement based. It is like man-made issues require man-made solutions. So maybe we do need supplements. Maybe we do need routines to get rid of heavy metals, to get rid of toxins that we might have already accumulated. But innately speaking, our body isn't broken. It just needs resources to do what it's designed to do.
That's definitely true. I mean, again, you look at the conventional medical system, it's like you said, it's just built off this belief that our body's fundamentally broken without these pharmaceuticals that were only invented like 100 years ago. It's like, if that were the case, how did all of humanity survive until then? Um, but you've talked about how artificial light downregulates melatonin production and how that negatively impacts sleep, cellular repair. But what about if you're waking up and the first thing you're doing is looking at your phone? How is that affecting our circadian rhythm negatively?
Mhm. Yeah, that's a great point. So obviously darkness is really, really important, but what you do of a morning is also important, especially for women and women's fertility. Um, Not only just taking a step back, it's like we're not designed to wake up and see 10 different news articles and watch what happened on a train yesterday and watch who was done what, or all
Mhm.
in within 2 seconds of waking up. That is so stressful on the nervous system. And then on top of that, we have this light exposure, which is essentially signaling to our body that it's midday and that we've slept all morning and now we're stepping out of our cave for the first time and it's midday and we have all this bright light, which is also super stressful for the body, and it's going to upregulate cortisol production. Now, something that I will say for any women listening to this is that that is super important. It's important for men as well, but it impacts women more so. And this is why with client work, I'll often see that the girl or the female has been sick for quite some time with issues, and then a few years later, the male will start to develop the same issues. It just takes a little bit longer for them to feel the effects of it, but doesn't mean it's not there. Um, the issue with female fertility that I see is something called pregnenolone steal syndrome. And so basically your body again is always working
Hmm.
in within your best interest in mind. And so if I'm waking up and I'm feeling really stressed because that light is increasing my cortisol, it's what's on my screen is dysregulating my nervous system as well. My body is going to sense that as, okay, Kiera has high cortisol. She's really, really stressed right now, and it's not time for her to make a baby because even if she does have a baby, it's probably not going to survive because her environment is so stressful. Something's causing her cortisol to spike, right? And in evolutionary perspective, nothing was going to spike our cortisol like that,
Hmm.
except for a tiger or I don't know, a war. But now that's not the case. And so my body does this really great thing where it says, okay, I'm not going to make Kira's fertility hormones. I'm actually just going to increase her cortisol because I want her to be safe. So she needs to be alert. She needs to be ready to run. She needs to be on it today to keep herself safe. And then I have more cortisol. But in response to that, uh, the precursors that were used to make my fertility hormones have gone to make more cortisol. So now I'm not fertile, and that's happening month on month on month for women, and it's causing such severe hormone dysregulation. Um, and so, yeah, you're essentially losing time as well. Not only is it messing with your hormones, it's messing with your internal circadian time. And I mean, I used to have a lot of opinions on that and how that affected our biology, but I've really had to take a step back and say, we don't actually have the answers. Like, we don't have the research. And although research is fundamentally flawed, um, it's one of the best methods that we have. And so just how far that goes to impacting our biology, we actually don't know yet. We already know it's a detriment, but just how far it goes. I mean, the studies are coming out every week now, but it'll be interesting to see what we find in the next 5 years.
Yeah, what you said about we aren't meant to look at 10 different news headlines when we wake up. That's
Mhm.
I mean, it's not just the artificial blue light at that point spiking our cortisol. It's just the stress you get from that. And that's so true. So what would you say is what would you say is the ideal morning routine instead of what most people are doing, which is just looking at their phones?
Yeah. So I will say that I don't do this all the time anymore. But when I was healing, there was a good 6 months there where this is all that all that I did. Um, I had to sacrifice a lot of things to maintain this routine, but it was definitely worth it to be where I am now. So the ideal morning routine, well, you want to come off the back of a really nice deep sleep, which means that you've blocked out all the light in your bedroom. Darkness is really important. So I got little bits of blue tack and duct tape. I covered like all the little lights in my house. I got blockout curtains and I made sure my room was really, really dark. So much so that if I needed to get up in the night, I was like touching the walls,
Mhm.
like trying to figure out like where I was in my room. Like that's the situation that we
Mhm.
want when you're sleeping. You don't want to know where you are. Um, so that's step one. Step two is you want to wake up at the same time every day. Ideally, that's around sunrise. Now, I know that there's a lot of nuance for people with shift work, but today we're just going to not touch on that. Keep it nice and simple. Waking up at sunrise, getting straight outside. So you want to get outside, let your eyes, let your skin know what time of day it is to start resetting that circadian rhythm. Now, I personally, after sunrise, I go back inside and I make my breakfast because I want to eat protein. We can use cortisol to break down protein as well. So if you're someone who is quite stressed or coming off the back of night shift or blue light toxicity, great tip. It's also super anti-inflammatory. Suffering with weight issues, great idea to have a lot of protein and fat for breakfast. Um, so then I go in, I start cooking my breakfast. Then UVA rise is going to start. So the light that's from the sun is changing all the time. Um, we focus on sunrise, UVA rise, UVB rise, right? But there actually is so many changes all the time. But I think these are, as we know it now, the most dominant changes that are the most important for your biology. And so I'll make my breakfast, watch sunrise, go in, make my breakfast, take that outside, and I'm eating my breakfast grounded. Again, no sunglasses, nothing like this, just letting my body interact with nature, bare feet on the ground, and then yeah, going about my day. It doesn't have to be a super strict routine. I think some people really stress themselves out
Mm.
trying to be healthy, but even these small source stimuluses are really important. And the other thing that's super important is just making sure that you try and keep your inside home, uh, I guess, as illuminated as outside is. So, for example, if I'm going back in from sunrise and it's an overcast day and making my breakfast, I'm not going to turn on all the bright lights
Mm.
and then cook my breakfast and then go back outside to a dim environment. You kind of want to keep all your lights down until that sun is really bright outside and then taper that back off in the afternoon. But your morning really, it sets you up for success. So you need to make sure you're getting outside. Even just switching from, I mean, what does everybody do? They wake up and they look at their phone straight away. And they're scrolling in bed for like, I don't even want to know how long. Um, so even just switching from doing that to just spending the first 10 minutes of your day having a cup of tea outside, grounded under natural sunlight is going to do wonders for your whole health. And then eventually your circadian rhythm will set in. And then it'll become easeful to wake up at that time and your body will start waking up at that time. When I first started this lifestyle, I was like laying in bed talking to myself, like, come on, Kiera, like get out of bed. Like, come on, just do it just for 10 minutes, just get out of bed. I was having to like encourage myself to do it. And then after a few weeks, I think I was like doing cartwheels outside because I was just so happy that I wasn't so exhausted anymore.
Mm.
So for anyone who's like, I've tried that, it doesn't work, just keep going. And eventually it'll all rewire for you.
And it doesn't cost any money, does it? It's completely free. It's what our ancestors did. Um, but so for our more esoteric listeners, I'd love for you to explain what is pro-opiomelanocortin, POMC, and how does this change throughout the day as the wavelengths of light change?
Of course, that's a
Mm.
big question. I haven't talked about POMC for so
Mm.
long. Okay, so POMC is it's a substance in our body that can be cleaved up according to our instruction manual. So it's not just light that does this, lots of different things can do it. But it can become cleaved to make, I think it's like over 100 different things or something like that. So it's super, super long peptide and it gets cleaved up depending what light you're around, what's happening in your physiology, become different things. So one thing that it can become is AMSH, which is something that we need to make a tan. And that is all dependent on our light exposure. So to make melanin in our skin to get tan, it really is that light on our skin that causes, I guess, DNA breakage and all these things. And in response, we're going to cleave POMC to make AMSH, and then that's going to go on to help us make a tan. And so that's just one example of how sunlight is interacting with our biology to actually create a physical change. It can also do lots of different things. It impacts the neurotransmitters, how you feel. It can also really influence depression, anxiety, postpartum depression as well, really heavily. But yeah, it's super important for your biology. And what we're realizing now is that artificial light exposure is really just messing up this system. And
Mm,
so we're not getting, POMC isn't being cleaved into the right things at the right time. And if we want to talk about tanning, I mean, if you're not exposing your skin, you have sunscreen on and you have sunglasses on as well, and you're blocking that light signal to your biology, that's one way that you can really get sunburn, is
mm,
because POMC is relying on that light through the eyes to actually have itself cleaved to help you make a tan, which is going to reflect that light as well as absorb it, and actually use it to do positive things in your biology. And so I always find it really funny when I see people complaining that they're sunburned, but they have like these big white patches around their eyes from their sunglasses. And I
mm.
thought, well, if you just took those sunglasses off, then maybe you wouldn't be so burnt. Um, but yeah, I hope that answers your question.
That was great. And I always tell people that when it comes to the sun, our body has an inbuilt biological mechanism to, I don't want to say defend because it makes it sound like the sun's bad, but just to use it to our advantage. Um,
Mhm.
but it's just that we've destroyed it with, like you've said, artificial blue light, um, sunglasses, sunscreen. That's a huge topic. Um,
Mhm.
so yeah, I'd love for you to speak about why, just to speak a bit more about how wearing sunscreen and wearing sunglasses, how it's actually not good for us.
Yeah, awesome. You'll have to get, you know who's really knowledgeable on POMC, who's like
Mhm.
autistically knowledgeable, is
Mhm.
Jack Schroeder.
Yeah,
He is POMC king. You'll have to get him on to chat more about
yeah,
that. Um, but what was your question? Sorry, was it about
yeah.
sunlight and
So it's
sunscreen?
like, what's the issue with wearing sunscreen and sunglasses, and how is that destroying our body's built-in mechanism to defend or utilize the sun to our advantage?
Yeah, awesome. So, um, I mean, one issue that we should probably talk about before that is the fact that people like myself, my family have some different ethnicity in there. So I actually do go quite
Mhm.
tan. But my mother, for example, she is from Ireland. Like they're
Mm,
Scottish, Irish through and through. She has bright red hair and fair skin. And if she goes in the sun, I've tested this, like she will actually burn.
mm,
Like it's not great. Um, but so just like certain dog breeds, for example, in Australia, people are always saying it's so cruel to have a long-haired German Shepherd in Queensland because the weather's too hot for them. They don't do
mm,
well in heat. And that's exactly the same as people. We're designed for different environments. We have different skin types, different amounts of melanin in us, different amounts of vitamin D receptors in our mitochondrion. And we're really designed to be in the environment in which we're adapted to. But now that we have this beautiful ability to pretty much teleport overnight to anywhere we
mm,
want in the world, um, our biology and our environment are very much out of sync. And so, for example, if I was in Ireland in the winter, the amount of melanin that I have in my skin to protect me from the sun is going to be optimized for that environment. And there's probably going to be no melanin inside
mm,
of me because my body actually doesn't want melanin. It wants my skin to be clear. It wants more sunlight in. So it's going to withdraw the melanin. But then if I fly over to Australia and then I go lay in the sun, my body goes, oh my gosh, I didn't even know that it was summer. I haven't done the things I needed to do.
mm,
I'm not built for this environment. And so we get this like little malfunction happening there, like a German Shepherd in the heat in Queensland. So I will say that people just aren't designed for certain environments, but doesn't mean you can't do things to better manage your health in that
mm,
environment. Um, and so an issue that we have, and this goes the other way too, like Indians in Europe, like they get really
mm,
sick. They all get the same diseases, same reason, supposedly. So wearing sunglasses, it's really blocking the input signal for our biology. So POMC is one of those reasons. Like if we're wearing sunglasses, we're not going to get that cleavage properly, and we're not going to make the melanin needed for our environment. Sunscreen's another one. It's loaded with toxins. And then we apply that to our skin, and then those toxins heat up, and then they're absorbed through our skin. So I don't believe that you should put anything on your skin that you can't put in your mouth.
Mm,
It's bizarre to me that sunscreen says poison,
mm,
type 1 carcinogen, do not eat. But it's like, you can put this on your skin and you can go lay in the sun though. And that just doesn't make sense to me at all, because our skin's going to absorb that as well. So bizarre that that's allowed, honestly. Like it's really bizarre. Um, but yeah, another reason, I mean, the sunglasses and the sunscreen, big issues. They stop you from getting tan, from actually adapting to your environment. But I mean, I love to explain it like this. It's also just modern living.
mm.
So if I'm like, let's say I'm a man and well, I don't want to pick on men. So I'll just, I'm a girl. I'm
Yeah.
a girl and I'm working at home in my office, and I get up in the morning and I go turn on my coffee machine. I make a coffee, I have breakfast, I turn on the news, I check my social media, um, and then I go into my office and I work until 1, and then I go do some grocery shopping and I come home and I go back to my office. And when I leave the house, I put on sunglasses
Mm,
and I'm wearing sunscreen. And my body never actually gets to see what environment I'm actually in. Like, how hot is it
mm,
outside? Probably I'm sitting in an air-conditioned office all day. What is the sun doing? Is my body even feeling that there's UV out? And the answer is probably no, because I'm not allowing it to. So I'm really blocking my environment and my body from interacting with each other. And so what happens is, probably in the middle of summer, my husband goes, "It's so hot today. Let's take the kids to the beach." And so I say, "Okay." And then I go outside to the beach, and I'm probably in this heat for the first time in months. And my body says, "Whoa, whoa, whoa. I had no idea that it was summer. I thought that it was the middle of winter because I'm
mm,
sitting in a 20-degree aircon all the day. I haven't even sensed the UV light through my eyes because I'm always wearing sunglasses. And then I burn because my body hasn't naturally adapted this beautiful increase of melanin over time, or done the things that it needs to do to prepare my body for that season." And yeah, of course I'm going to sunburn because my body's like, what the hell? I was actually preparing for more light to come in.
mm,
I wanted more light. And so it's just a complete disconnection. And we seem to forget this as people, that we're actually just animals, and we actually need our environment. Um, we need to be interacting with it constantly, all the time, every day, so that my body can actually adapt to the seasons, to the day length, to the changes in my environment. Um, and I mean, we're in this poor health, chronic health pandemic. And so it took for our health for us to realize this. But now we're starting to ask the questions, and we're realizing that maybe it is modern living, and maybe it is our chronic disconnection from nature that's causing us to get sick. Maybe it isn't just genetics of
mm.
illnesses that our parents never had. So I don't know how we inherited it from them in the first place.
And like you said, maybe it's not the sun, maybe it's the fact that we've destroyed our body's ability to recognize signals and respond accordingly. Um, and you've talked a bit about how sunscreen blocks vitamin D production, and which is it alpha MSH that it blocks as well?
So sunscreen is going to block the UV light from actually getting onto the skin.
Mm,
And UV light is what sulfates cholesterol to become, we say vitamin D, but it's more so a hormone. That's actually how we make vitamin D, is that the sunlight sulfates cholesterol, and then that gets turned into, well, eventually it gets turned into vitamin D. So if you're covering your skin all the time, the more skin exposure you have to the UV as well, the more vitamin D you'll make. But yeah, so if you're covering your skin all the time and you're not getting out in the sunlight, you're not going to make that vitamin D, um, which is preventative against so many things. But I'm actually about to release a podcast with Stephanie. No, not Stephanie. It's already out, actually. I
mhm,
interviewed a lady called Professor Prue Hart, and she talks about how it's not even vitamin D itself
mm,
that's good for you. It's just a proxy for how much time you spent outside. So if you have been out in the UV light a lot, then you'll have high vitamin D. But that's just telling you, that's just a biological marker for how much UV light you've had. But when you were out in UV light, there's also so many other things, so many other metabolites that are created in your body that is so helpful for health, like uraconic acid.
Mm,
But everyone seems to hyperfixate on vitamin D, which leaves them just supplementing it. But you can't really supplement the time spent in UV light, which is interesting. But I mean, that's another reason why we probably find ourselves, I mean, just speaking on it now with you, in this high cholesterol pandemic, is
mm,
because if we're not, like if you have low vitamin D and high cholesterol, of course, like
mm.
those two are paired together. Because if you're not out in UV light, then your cholesterol's not being sulfated, so it's not being used essentially, and then obviously it's just going to sit there and cause you to have increased
Mm.
cholesterol.
That makes so much sense to me. It's UVB light that converts cholesterol into vitamin D. Um,
Mhm.
so what happens if you take a vitamin D supplement? Because I actually listened to that podcast you mentioned with was it Dr. Hart about how
Mhm.
UV light corrects autoimmunity. I listened to that podcast and you guys talked about how yeah, you shouldn't be taking a vitamin D supplement like even during winter. So is that like is that useless or is that like actually bad?
Um, well, there's some really big there was a big cohort study done. I think it was in the New England Journal of Medicine.
Mm,
Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it was that showed that vitamin D supplementation did nothing
mm,
in a big cohort study to prevent I don't know what it was, maybe like autoimmunity or something. If it was Prue that was saying it, probably was. There's some small studies, I think, that show that really high dose vitamin D can be helpful. But really, the data really isn't that convincing at all. It's quite weak. Um, and so, with taking vitamin D orally, I think there is a lot of issues with it. One, it's taking away someone's education because you're just thinking that you can just eat a synthetic form
mm,
of vitamin D and that it's going to act the same as when you make it. When we actually make vitamin D, um, we're sulfating cholesterol for one. And so if you're just taking a vitamin D supplement, you're bypassing that whole process. So already it's like you're like, I'm just going to take a supplement instead of sulfating my cholesterol, which is probably going to give me high cholesterol.
mm,
Um, and not only that, is you, as we just spoke about, it's like you're getting all these other metabolites. You're actually spending time outside. When you're under the UV light as well, it's going to release nitric oxide, which is fantastic for health. So you're getting all these other benefits. And so, really, what Prue's saying is that you don't need to take vitamin D. It's not actually that good for your health. It can actually cause, I mean, I haven't seen any data surrounding this, but I've seen a lot of people in the community say that it displaces cholesterol as well.
mm,
Um, but I'm just logically speaking, I think it's more so the fact cholesterol is not getting sulfated. Um, but yeah, Prue's whole point is just that it's not about vitamin D. It's about getting out into the UV light. It's about getting outside, right? It's about being outside. Um, because it just does so much more than vitamin D for your health. And again, the studies just aren't. Well, they are there actually. Um, but more research needs to be done, I guess, and published.
mm. I've also heard that if you're that vitamin D binds to the same receptor that melatonin does. And
Mhm.
what I've heard is that if you're taking vitamin D supplements at night, you're actually blocking melatonin because your body thinks it's daytime because you're taking vitamin D, which you ancestrally speaking only get during the daytime, and that would
Mhm.
downregulate melatonin. And you're supposed to use vitamin D during the day as an anti as a cellular repair molecule and melatonin at night. So could that be true as well if you're taking vitamin D at night that you're down-regulating melatonin production?
That could be true. Yeah,
Mm.
definitely. I'll have to look into that more. But I mean, you know what you're talking about.
Mm.
You're very intelligent. That's interesting. Yeah, I haven't heard that before, but it makes sense. I mean, I think I heard what's her name? Sarah Pugh talk about it actually. But that would make sense.
Mm.
I wonder if it can give similar properties uh to melatonin when it does bind, though, I wonder.
Mm. Yeah, I
Because do
do.
you know when you're out in the sun and you get really sleepy?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I do wonder because someone listening to this might think, well, if I'm taking vitamin D at night, then it's actually I don't need melatonin, so it's not a bad thing that I'm suppressing melatonin, which doesn't seem like instinctively just doesn't seem right to me.
No, I don't think, I don't think that taking, yeah, vitamin D at night time is probably good because we're not even designed to make it at
Mm,
night. We're designed to utilize that during the day. So it would just seem like another circadian mismatch to me,
mm.
I think.
And is it true that if you get enough vitamin D during the summertime, that that can actually sustain itself to the winter time because it's a fat soluble vitamin?
hmm
Mm,
Yeah, it can. There's also, I was talking to my good friend Cameron Borg, and he was saying that nowhere actually ever loses UVB.
mm,
It's like you actually never ever lose UVB anywhere on the globe, and that's due to scattering. And
mm,
so potentially, and I think Scott Zimmerman was the one who spoke to him about this, but potentially you just don't. But I had some questions about this actually, very funny. But even you have to think about the way that we even measure light,
mm,
and we have to think about the ways that our devices that we actually use, and all of the previous measuring systems that we have, are they faulted? And maybe that they are. It just means that you would have to be outside all the time, to get access to that, which makes sense. We kind of think that you can actually sulfate cholesterol when you get cold through cold
mm,
exposure, and that can actually create vitamin D. I think Thomas, the owner of Morocco Forge, spoke about this, but I looked at he put up a post about it, and he referenced an article because I hadn't seen any evidence of this yet. They might be out now, but he referenced an article, went on and looked at the article, and it was an article that he had written. And then I looked at the
right.
references, and there was nothing. So I was like,
Mm,
very interesting.
mm,
Um, I think there's something might have come out recently, though. I'm not too sure. If anyone has anything, feel free to send it to me. But so the whole point was if you get cold and, like, let's say you're in Antarctica or Ireland in winter, then that coldness is actually going to be able to generate vitamin D for you.
mm,
But now we're also thinking, is there a scattering of UVB light, and is that actually allowing you to make vitamin D? But again, I don't have the answers for that, or
mm.
someone much smarter than me probably does.
I'll definitely look into it because I mean, ancestrally speaking, it makes sense that our ancestors they had months of just complete coldness, but they were
Mhm.
still able to reap the benefits of UVB light, I suppose. Um,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
sort of
We also
to
have, oh, sorry, you go.
no, yeah, you go first.
We also have inactive and active vitamin D as well, and it needs to be transferred back. So if you have like a large storage of vitamin D,
Mhm,
then you can probably, you have more in your piggy bank in terms of when it is winter or you do need it, for whatever we use it for, which I don't think we truly even know what we utilize it for, really, to play with as well.
mm. And sort of to, if anyone's listening and wondering, well, if someone might be listening and thinking, if I stop wearing sunscreen, I'll burn. If I stop wearing sunglasses, I'll burn. So what advice would you give to them? Because it's not just stop wearing sunscreen, but keep doing everything else exactly the same. So like, what, what is the full advice you'd give to them?
Yeah, of course. Um, so sunburn obviously does create damage to the DNA. Being in the sun does. That's actually what makes us tan. So if you
Mm,
have a tan, it's because you've had your DNA has been damaged and
mm,
POMC is being cleaved and you've created melanin in your skin. Congratulations. That's what we want to happen. So
mm,
kind of like what I was talking about before, you need to make sure that you, one, are not in an inflamed state. So eating things like seed oils, which are hyper-inflammatory, not a good idea because the sun in itself is already going to be inflammatory. People who have histamine responses or MCAS, you'll see that they'll get quite swollen in the sun, or they will start to flare because it's just so much extra inflammation into their system. So one is low inflammatory diet, take your vitamin C's, make sure that you are supporting melatonin production, get your circadian rhythm right. Second advice is give yourself exposure to sunlight at a regular basis.
mm,
So, with that example I gave before of the girl sitting inside and never being outside until one day in the middle of summer, don't be that girl.
mm,
So, make sure you're going out at least for like 10, 15 minutes every single day, allowing your body to sense that climb in UV. And then your melanin will actually form naturally. So at the start of spring, as it gets into summer, my body will start producing more and more melanin until the middle of summer, and then I will actually have that melanin in my body to allow me to handle that light better,
Hmm.
right? And not sunburn. So don't be a silly goose and just go and
Mm.
lay out in the middle of summer for 2 hours. Work your way up to it. And then also morning sunlight is super healing. UVA light is going to prime your skin to handle that UVB light too. So don't even just go sunrise to UVB. You need to do sunrise, UVA, UVB. And just be safe about it. If you're my mother from Ireland, like you're probably never going to be able to lay out in the middle of Australian summer for 3 hours, and that's okay. Just go into the shade. It doesn't mean you need to put sunscreen or sunglasses on. It just means that you just need to be in the shade.
Mm. No, 100%.
Yeah.
And I tell people it's like if you're not someone who runs, don't go out and run a marathon on your first ever try. That doesn't mean running's bad for you. It just means you have to prepare yourself. Or if you're someone who doesn't do weightlifting, don't try to squat like 150 kilos. But that again, that doesn't mean that weightlifting's bad for you. It just means every person's limit is different. But the great thing is that we can change that. There is one last thing about the sun that I want to ask you because I've it's what would you say to people who say that well our ancestors like they say something about how global warming's changed the amount of UV that we get so that which is why the amount of UV our ancestors got wasn't as dangerous as what we get these days, and that's why we need sunscreen, we need sunglasses. How would you respond to that?
Um, Good question. There was an interesting study done. I'll try and find it for you so you can
Mhm.
link it. But it shows that people, even with melanoma, which is supposedly caused by UV light, are like 100 times healthier than people with low vitamin D.
Mm.
Even though they have melanoma, like you can just you can just get rid of the melanoma. It's not that hard.
Mm.
Um, and these people who have high UV exposure, even if they do have melanoma, even if their skin is a bit dark, they're still healthier and they're happier and they're more
Mm.
fertile than people who don't. So I think there's a big lesson in there. Um, Even if UV light is causing melanoma, I don't I don't believe it's of detriment,
Mm.
or that the benefit definitely outweighs the risk, I would
Mm.
say, in that scenario. Um, Definitely. And I mean, the risks associated with UV light exposure is maybe skin cancer, but the risk associated with low UV light exposure is Alzheimer's, it's dementia, it's
Mm.
these chronic health conditions that are really, really hard to heal. And so you have to try and find a happy medium there, and it's whatever you're comfortable with, really. Um, but I would say that that's just silly.
Yeah.
I would say it's a modern environment. It's the blue light at night. It's the lack of sleep, the lack of repair, the poor nutrition that's causing us to be so susceptible to sunlight. It's not actually the sunlight itself. Yeah.
And I mean people with low UV exposure, low UVB exposure, they still get skin cancer. It's because they've spent like 10 months or 11 months indoors on their phones, um, damaging their cells with artificial light, and then they go out on vacation for like a week. Like you said, that
Mhm.
girl, it's like their UV exposure is considered low. It's just that once they get out in the sun for like a very long period of time, then that's when they get skin cancer. So even then, it's like they would still count as like low UVB exposure people.
Yeah,
But
exactly.
yeah.
And pay attention to the people in your life too. Like it's really a lot of people have a lot to say online about these topics.
Mm.
But I think it's really important to just treat everything with some skepticism and look at the
Mm.
data for yourself, look at the studies, read them, and then just look at the people in your life. And my stepdad, I went and saw him last year. And I gave him a hug on the back, and I mean, a hug, a hug on the back, a hug.
Mm.
And I gave him a pat on the back as I was leaving. And I felt this big lump. And I said, "What is that?" He said, "It's skin cancer." He's a farmer and he has a massive skin cancer on his back, where the sun does not shine. And so you would think that if it was
Mm.
the UV light that was causing the skin cancer, that would be on his face or something, but it's not. So I found that very interesting.
That's yeah, that's very interesting. I heard a story about a gamer who got skin cancer on his foot, on the bottom of his foot, and he was like chronically indoors. I think Jordan talked about this on his podcast, but yeah, it just goes to show that it's it's not about UVB light exposure. It's about our skin cells being damaged by all of these things that we've talked about.
Mhm.
But I'd sort of like to shift. I think we've covered the sun like to very lots of detail. I'd like to talk a bit about whole seasonal eating aspect of it because what I've noticed on Instagram or Twitter is a lot of these health influencers say, let's take Paul Saladino for example, who he was doing a carnivore diet and then he switched when he moved to Costa Rica to do an animal-based diet. But I remember he was incorporating a lot of fruit and a lot of like tropical fruits and honey, and but he wasn't really telling his audience that that was because he moved to Costa Rica and now he's in a different environment with different UV light exposure. Um,
Mhm.
and then he'll tell people that his diet's the optimal diet without specifying that that's because he lives in Costa Rica. And then I think it's a bit dangerous because who lives in, say, Iceland, they might think, oh, well, I have to eat like Paul Saladino because he says it's the optimal diet. So they're going to start like importing fruits from, say, Southeast Asia or like, and why is that a problem? And why do we see so many of these health influencers not tell people that? And yeah, how is the lack of seasonality affecting our health?
Yeah, of course. I think it's really important to note that, I mean, we were talking before about how light dictates hormone production and
Mm,
neurotransmitter release as well, but it's also going to dictate how we actually break down food in our body and how our metabolism actually runs.
mm,
And so the electron transport chain, which essentially takes all the food that's broken down, that gets converted into those tiny subatomic particles, protons and electrons, and turns them into energy for our body, the way that actually runs isn't the same all the time.
mm,
And so different complexes will get upregulated or downregulated depending on the input signals that it receives, one of those being sunlight and also temperature.
mm,
Temperature is a massive regulator of of the electron transport chain. That's why when you do cold therapy, you convert a lot of white fat to brown fat,
mm,
and you make a lot more mitochondrial density. And women who suffer from obesity, one of the best ways for them to lose weight is to actually get cold because it's forcing that metabolism to switch into fat
mm,
burning. And so that's just a great example of how the temperature is actually regulating our metabolism. And so if I'm in, I guess, Costa Rica and I'm Paul Saladino, and I'm trying to eat a bunch of fats and proteins, my environment really isn't optimizing me for that. It's telling me there's a lot of UV around, there's a lot of
mm,
fruit here. As Andra says, eat your hydration,
mm,
lots of fruits. We're getting a lot of solar energy from our environment as well, which can offset what we would be getting, I guess, from other food sources. Um, and so that environment is really just signaling me to consume a different diet. Whereas if I was in somewhere like Iceland, and I was really, really cold, my body is craving like gelatinous soup, it's
mm,
craving fats and protein, and my mitochondria are going to be optimized to suit that. I mean, we talk a lot about like fat burning metabolism or carbohydrate metabolism. And it really does come back to where your mitochondria originated from and where your environment actually, where you are. And that's going to dictate how your metabolism runs. And so you have to eat seasonally, you have to eat locally for your environment. You want the foods that you're eating to
mm,
match your metabolism. Otherwise, you're just putting the wrong fuel into the wrong car and expecting a good outcome. It's not going to work
mm,
like that. Um, in this space as well, people talk a lot about like light coding through different foods, um, which is a really interesting topic. The fact that the food where it's grown essentially is holding the light energy of its environment.
mm,
And I'm not going to act like I'm an expert on this because I'm not, and I'm quite logical and I do like to see data, and there isn't much on this topic at all. But it's an interesting thought to think of the fact that my body, when it strips those electrons of light, and it does in the electron transport chain, it's using that as some sort of information,
mm,
some way to maintain homeostasis and to know where it is on the planet. I think that's really interesting to
mm.
try and conceptualize.
And how
But as
does,
for
yeah, sorry, I interrupted you.
as for the influencer
Mm,
component that you kind of asked about, I think it's really important to note that like social media is just a projection.
mm,
Like you talk about the things you're interested in, you talk about the health concerns that you probably have or that you've overcome. Um, and so what everyone's posting is like literally what they're learning or what's
mm,
working for them. but it's all a road. I mean, for example, Veronica blocked me last year when I told her that red light would fix her thyroid, and then 2 months later she posted how red light was fixing her thyroid.
Right.
So
Right. Oh,
it's just as
yeah.
someone learns, grows, so does their healthcare practice, the way they work with clients. Um, so I think it's important not to treat anyone as a god and just to understand that we're all learning. And just because someone doesn't know that red light's good for them doesn't mean that they're silly. They're still
Hmm.
doing 99% more than the average person, you
Mm.
know?
And yeah, with the seasonality aspect, I see this a lot with not naming any names, but like the repeat community, where they live
Not to name
in,
names, the entire rape
yeah,
community.
um, they're like they'll live in London or whatever, and they'll live in like a top floor apartment, but they'll be having all these tropical fruits. They'll be the way I see it, it's they're trying to mimic. I don't know if you see it this way as well, but the way I see it is that they're trying to trick their body into thinking they're living in the tropics when
Mhm.
they're living in like a penthouse in central London. But this is like, and how does deuterium tie into this? Because I've heard you speak a bit about deuterium and why, yeah, seasonal
Yeah.
eating.
No, I made such a good point there when people living in London they try to trick their bodies into thinking that it's tropical summer.
Hmm.
And it does work for a little bit, right? Because you think that somebody who's coming off a Western diet and then they start eating like a repeat diet, they're going to feel better because they've just cut out a lot of crappy foods. Their blood sugar is probably spiking all the time. They have all of this energy where they probably didn't have it before.
Mm.
But then what happens, and I've seen this with women who jump into my DMs on Twitter or X or whatever it's called these days, and they say, "Hey, I've been doing the repeat thing and I was feeling really good, but now like 8 months later, my thyroid is
Mm.
toast and I don't know what to do. I feel I'd have no energy. I don't have any progesterone. They have all of these issues." And so you have to go back to the drawing board then and kind of start from scratch, and fix the root cause before you start incorporating more of like a pretty approach to things. But yeah, it's interesting. And even if you are living on a top floor apartment, right, then you're going to have a lack of magnetism, you're going to have
Mm.
reactive oxygen species, all of these things. And I don't think like a high ROS diet is probably going to do much for that. But to answer your question about the deuterium, I'm going to release a podcast soon with Stephanie Seneff.
Mm.
And literally,
I'm sorry, is she the EMF woman, like the researcher who's talks about EMFs and glyphosate, which we can get into, but I've
oh
seen
yeah,
her, yeah, I've seen her stuff.
oh, she's the best person ever. Like I look up to
Mm.
her so much. After podcasting with her, I just thought some people look up to like celebrities, but I look up
Yeah.
to Stephanie Seneff.
Mm.
Like I want to be like her. She's so beautiful and so passionate, so intelligent. Um, but yeah, so she does a far better job than me about this. I can introduce you to if you like,
Mm.
but I can try. So deuterium is an isotope of hydrogen. And so we have the periodic table and we think that that's standard and that's all there is, but turns out there's actually lots of different variations of things on the
Mm.
periodic table and they're called isotopes. And so one of those isotopes of hydrogen is called deuterium. Deuterium is acts the exact same way chemically as hydrogen,
Mm.
except for it has an extra subatomic particle, which means that it's double the mass. And so it's like, what do they say? It's like hydrogen's fat cousin or something.
Right, that's funny.
They look the same,
That's
but
funny.
she's
Yeah.
just really fat
Hmm.
and heavy. And so when we consume a lot of deuterium as opposed to hydrogen, obviously it's going to be heavier.
Hmm.
Now, it's actually super light in the grand scheme of things, but it interacts with our biology a little bit differently. Now, the thought is that I guess from the standard like quantum health community
Mm.
conception, it's that when that deuterium makes it into the electron transport chain, because the hydrogens kind of get kicked out into the inner
Hmm.
membrane space, and they float back through the ATPase, and that's actually what's turning that ATPase to help the mitochondria
Hmm.
run, to pull oxygen to the transport to the end of the ECT to make water. When the hydrogen hits that, if it's not hydrogen and it's deuterium, it's kind of like if you were putting a spanner into a car motor, eventually
Mm.
it's going to break and it
Yeah.
doesn't really fit through there. And so it causes mitochondrial dysfunction, and then essentially you need like a cell repair mechanism to come in and like clean it up,
Mm,
clean up the mess. So that's one reason why deuterium is bad. Now, Stephanie Seneff, when I released this podcast, I'm basically just saying I don't understand any of that,
mm,
but I'll research it. She
mm,
talks a lot about how it can interfere with like bacterial growth,
mm,
and really deplete the amount of hydrogen gas that's made in our
mm,
GI system as well. But tying deuterium back into seasonal eating, which you were just alluding to, is the fact that somewhere where Paul Saladino lives in tropical Costa Rica, there's a lot of deuterium in the food there because
mm,
it's a high deuterium climate. Whereas somewhere like, I guess, Alaska, northern regions, there's not as much deuterium in the drinking water. Um, or in the food there, right? Or even in the cows there, because those cows are drinking deuterium depleted water, they're not eating high deuterium foods. But a person named Laszlo Boros, he's a great
mm,
researcher, he's linked high deuterium concentrations to the increase in cancer.
mm,
And he wrote a beautiful book called Defeating Cancer, where he did a ton of trials showing that a deuterium depletion diet could actually defeat cancer, which is great. The book's really cheap for anyone
mm,
who wants to buy it. Really interesting read. Um, and so one of the big issues in Western culture is the fact that high deuterium is not actually bad for you. You do
mm,
need it, but just like everything, it's in a ratio. And so, for example, like we were eating even, you know, like fats and proteins from cows. We were consuming cows that were eating deuterium depleted food.
mm,
So they were eating grass, they were drinking water, even if they are in a high deuterium climate. But now they're not able to detox the deuterium because they're not outside. They're in
mm,
feedlots, not around sunshine, have no melanin. They're being fed very high deuterium water because they're drinking essentially chemical filled laden
mm,
water, tap water like us. It's not rainwater anymore, much higher in deuterium. And then they're also eating like all these processed man-made foods and feedlot slop, basically, which
mm,
is super high in deuterium. And so the meat that we get from them is much higher in deuterium than even a pineapple. So even
mm,
if we are eating deuterium depleted foods such as fats and proteins, they're much heavier in deuterium than they ever were. And the issue is that eating a high fat and a high protein, like something that's a fat and a protein that's high in deuterium, is going to actually be worse for you than eating that
mm,
exact same deuterium concentration in like a pineapple or a
mm,
piece of fruit. Because the way that your body metabolizes these things, it knows, like ancestrally, um, through like the way that we break down carbohydrates, it knows that it's going to be high in deuterium. And so that pathway actually kicks out the
mm,
deuterons. So that by the time it makes it to the electron transport chain, it's less likely to be deuterium. Whereas our body's not designed to know fats or proteins to be
mm.
high in deuterium. And so more of those deuterons are going to make it into the electron transport chain. Um, so that was a bit of a tangent,
Mm.
but yeah, that's
I
why
mean,
deuterium is great.
that makes a lot of sense to me. And you talked about how it's been linked to cancer as well. I've heard, yeah, Laszlo Boros and Gabor, I'm gonna butcher his sir, Gabor Somali.
Good job.
Yeah. But they've talked about how it's the fact that, like you said, when you eat, when you get deuterium in your mitochondria, you're not making that um exclusion zone water, which I think this is a good time to bring up Gerald Pollack and the whole exclusion zone water theory. But um, so how is that affecting our ability to? Is it the easy water, the structured water, which kicks out deuterium? Could you, yeah, explain that a bit?
Yeah, of course. Um, I think the deuterium, it actually creates stronger hydrogen bonds.
Hmm.
So in water, obviously, there's hydrogen bonds, H2O. Um, if there's a deuteron instead of a hydrogen, it's kind of like if you're holding someone's hand and you really don't want to let go,
Hmm.
and then they have to start pulling harder and harder for that bond to
Hmm.
break. So it requires more energy. And so it makes things more stiff. It makes water more
Hmm.
stiff. And I think that has implications on health. To what degree, I have no idea.
Hmm.
The Gerald Pollack stuff is fascinating, really. They need to do more studies on it.
Mm,
Um, there's another researcher, I can't remember his name, Kevin something. He's doing a lot of work similar to Gerald Pollack, but it's not called fourth phase water. He's just calling it intracellular water. But I read his work
mhm,
and it was so fascinating. Honestly, it's like a hidden gem in the world,
mhm,
his work, because it elaborates on what Jared Pollock's talking about. But I think he has a lot more funding. But he's just using different terminology. So combine the two and it kind of gives you a bigger picture. Um, but in terms of the exclusion zone water, for anyone who's listening and you're like, what on earth is
mhm,
exclusion zone water? Well, um, good question because like we
mhm,
don't really know. But basically, we thought for the longest time that the water in our body was like the water that comes out of a tap.
mhm,
But if that was true, if you cut your finger and if we're 98% water, how come water doesn't just come flooding out of our body?
mhm,
And that's because it's not really in this water state. It's not even in a solid or a liquid. It's in this fourth phase. Um, and you can call it EZ water, you can call it intracellular water, whatever you want. But it is this gel-like consistency.
mhm,
And so it acts differently in our body. Um, Basically, the subatomic particles get pulled apart. So it's not really, I guess, even H2O anymore. It's this restructured substance. And so all the protons get pushed to the wayside.
mhm,
All the electrons are on the other side. You can think of it like a battery or like two
mhm.
sides of a book. Protons are negatively charged. Electrons are, wait, no, electrons
Yeah,
are negatively charged.
yeah.
Protons are positively charged. And then it kind of looks like a battery, right?
Mhm,
So much so that they actually put, and this is from Gilbert Ling, they put two little
mhm,
electrodes into each side of the water, and it was enough to actually power a light bulb, which is crazy. And I think that Gerald did do some studies in chickens and found that this actually was happening inside the body. And so the water is actually acting like a battery for us. And I think that can control because the electrons are on hydrophilic surfaces, so like cellular surfaces, and that actually can give energy or electricity to a cell and change the
mhm,
redox state of the cell, which will change like what ions can come in and out of that cell. And I think that this is really linked to cancer because the way that the way that cells go through mitosis, so they multiply, one of the one of the inputs it needs to actually cease that multiplication process is a change in the redox state of the cell. And
mhm,
so if there is no exclusion zone water, it doesn't get this input to stop. And so it just keeps on
mhm,
multiplying. We see this in aggressive tumors, aggressive cancers. Carrie Bennett actually taught me
mhm,
that in one of her posts. But yeah. And I mean, I was talking to Gerald about this. I mean, he knows now, but a few years ago on my podcast where I said to
mhm,
him about the link between cancer and easy water. And he said, that's so interesting. Um, because researchers, they don't know everything.
mhm.
They're just really hyper fixated on like their one
Yeah.
little area,
Mhm,
right? Which can be detrimental. But he said, I wonder if that's why I think one of his friends in like Korea or somewhere they put all these cancer patients next to the windows in the morning, which
mhm,
obviously is going to give them a ton of exposure to infrared light. He said, I wonder if that's why they got better quicker than the other people.
mhm.
So, I mean, yeah, I hope that
And
answers your
no, it does.
question.
And this might get a bit like esoteric, but I've heard you talk about how cells have a membrane voltage, like a negative membrane voltage. And is it and it's that when they lose their negative charge, they become cancer cells. Is that it? And is that due to them losing this negatively charged um exclusion zone surface?
Yeah, I'm not going to pretend like I know the cure for
Hmm.
cancer because I definitely
Yeah.
don't.
Hmm.
If I did, I probably wouldn't say it publicly,
Yeah.
if I expect to
Mm,
have my life.
mm,
Um, But I definitely think there's some fascinating studies going on with exclusion zone water and cancer. I think that I see red as like this really healing frequency.
mhm,
Um, and I think that to pin down cause and effect is really hard because you think of the fact that yes, we do have cancer cells and we do have all these things.
mhm,
but we should be able to take them out, right? Like
Hmm.
apoptosis should work, but it doesn't. And that's why I said before, when we're talking about hospitals, I think it would be really interesting to see what would actually happen um, if we actually had cancer patients sleeping in a dark room without circadian disruption, with optimal melatonin production, to actually see if they recovered far quicker than someone who wouldn't or doesn't. I think even just one study, the results would be so phenomenal that the world would be in an uproar, and it's probably why it's not done yet. Um, I think that between Stephanie Seneff, um, the two deuterium researchers, Laszlo Boris, Gerald Pollack, I think that some beautiful things are going to come out of that. And we'll start
Hmm.
seeing that there is a big connection between this exclusion zone, water, mitochondrial dysfunction, cellular redox, and cancer. I don't think it's one thing. I think it's a lot of things. But I think we're definitely getting close. I mean, I don't think it's genetics that one in, what was it? 30 years ago, it was like 1 in 100 women would develop
Hmm.
breast cancer in their life. And now, um, if I had four of my friends in the room, one of us are going to pass away from breast cancer in my generation. Like, that's
Hmm.
not okay. And we can't just keep saying it's genetics. You have to ask yourself, like, what actually is it? Like, what is this?
Hmm.
And putting more resources towards it. And maybe it's not worth putting
Hmm.
resources towards non-stop economic growth. I
Hmm.
mean, more cures, more pills, more pharmaceuticals, more research, more laboratories. Maybe it is about actually looking at what's changed in our environment. Is it the lack of sunlight? Is it malnutrition? Is it high estrogen? Is it the non-stop economic growth in
Hmm.
itself? Is it this ever-go society where women are designed to just be mini men?
Hmm.
I mean, we even know that artificial light exposure is going to increase estrogen, and that fuels breast cancer growth.
Hmm.
So, yeah, I'm just really hopeful and excited to see what happens in the next 10 years. We have some really great researchers in the space, and I'm so proud of them for what they're
Yeah.
doing.
And just as a last topic, this won't be too long, but I'm just
It's
curious about
fine.
um could you speak a bit about how non-native EMFs cause damage to our body and how grounding can sort of be what offsets that?
Of course. So a few things with EMF. For anyone who's wanting to learn more about EMFs, I definitely recommend following um, Tristan Scott
Hmm.
or the Blue Light Diet
Hmm.
on Twitter. They're fantastic. But just to put it very simply, because I feel like we've been so complex in this
Hmm.
podcast, we seem to think that just because we can't see something, it doesn't affect us. It's like if my mom's in a bad mood, like I don't even have to see her, I can feel it.
Hmm.
If someone's sad in a room and I walk into it, you can feel it, but you're not seeing it, but you can feel it. And just if I look outside my window, I can't see wind, but I know it's
Hmm.
windy because I can see the tree swaying in the wind. Um, the tree can't see the wind, but it can feel the wind and it's having a biological
Hmm.
response. I can't see the wind, but I can feel it when I have little goosebumps up and down my back when it's a cool breeze and it's affecting my biology. And this is the exact same as EMFs. Just because I can't see the radiation doesn't mean it's not impacting my biology or it's having a biological response. And we've just started to realize that our biology runs on input signals, just like a
Hmm.
machine. And tell my computer do X, Y, Z, and it does it. My biology is so heavily tied to the electromagnetism of the earth, the
Hmm.
Schumann's resonance, natural electromagnetic fields, um, even the electromagnetic field that gets generated from someone else's heart when you're hugging them.
Hmm. Hmm.
You feel that and your biology responds to it. But now we have all these artificial electromagnetic fields that our biology isn't really designed to run on.
Hmm.
And we know this through electronics. Our Wi-Fi router submits a frequency,
Hmm.
and my laptop is designed to pick up that frequency, but my body's not designed to pick up that
Hmm.
frequency. Um, my mitochondrial densities in my body, they have cristae,
Hmm.
and they actually interact with each other um, is by sharing information, and all those cristae line up like a beautiful puzzle piece, and that's how they share quantum information, I guess. And they work in little colonies, and this is just
Hmm.
one example. because you asked how it impacts our biology, when we're around EMFs, it actually disrupts that. And so
Mm,
there's no quantum coherence and they're not able to talk to each other. They have nothing to instruct them of how to be or how to move or how to function. And so we're actually essentially losing the battle against entropy. We're
mm,
not able to save energy. We're losing more than what we're creating. And our body's becoming so disconnected, it can't talk to each other anymore.
mm,
Our cells are so incoherent, and it's just creating a lack of coherence, really.
mm,
Like even now, like my laptop, I mean, I hate to admit this, but it's on charge.
mm,
So the information that my
mm,
mitochondria are receiving, my hand, my front of my body versus my back or my head or my feet,
mm,
it's completely, there's no coherence there. And never before in history has this occurred, like ever.
mm,
It's only due to our modern environment this is actually happening. Um, and I mean, I can confidently say it's horrible for our biology. There's enough studies done now,
mm.
and there's even more coming out all the time. So yeah, it's definitely quite concerning.
Yeah. And then I guess the second part of that question was how does because people think grounding is just complete like pseudoscience, fake, like woo-woo hippie stuff. So how does grounding actually offset the negative effects of EMFs?
Yeah, of course. So we kind of spoke about one effect then, but something else that happens with EMFs, even if I'm not on my phone, just for the
Mm,
wiring in my house, I'll actually get a cellular voltage on my skin.
mm,
It's like when you can zap each other by touching each other from jumping on a
mm,
trampoline. It's the exact same thing. Um, and that's abnormal. We're not designed to have that. And so when we actually ground, just like you're grounding a piece of electronic equipment, you're actually offsetting all of that voltage, all of that charge back into the earth where it's meant to
mm,
be. And so you're able to kind of offset that. I tell people to ground before they go to bed, just to kind
mm,
of like give themselves a bit of a refresh before sleeping. It's also super anti-inflammatory. In the space, people say it's because you're gathering electrons from the earth, right?
mm,
Um, I don't know if that's true. I don't know if it's because you're able to donate so much, I guess, like inflammation or whatever to the ground, or if you're actually gaining the
mm,
anti-inflammatory components of like the electrons. But there's so many studies that have been done showing like the increase in inflammation systemically after just 90 minutes of grounding.
mm,
Um, and I think Cameron Borg did a fantastic interview with the Irving Institute that have been around for like 50 years
mm,
there's so much evidence out there. It's really hard to deny that grounding is just the best way
mm,
and a free way, mind you, to reduce inflammation. And so EMFs can cause a bunch of cellular inflammation, but then if you're grounding, you can kind of counteract that.
mm,
So if you're someone that is perhaps working in an office or you're in an environment where you really can't control the amount of inflammation
mm,
that I guess you're receiving from your environment, then you need to be grounding as much as possible on like the weekends, or like when you can, because it's you're really your best defense against EMFs.
definitely. I mean, our ancestors didn't have non-native EMFs, but they were grounded. So yeah,
Mhm.
makes a lot of sense to me. And so I've got two last questions. First, would you ever recommend like people drink deuterium-depleted water? Because I know that's a thing. So,
Yeah. Just don't do what I do and drink 10 parts per million,
mm,
and then nearly faint because it's good.
mm,
You can drink deuterium depleted water. Um, I think it's called like Life Water or something. It's a brand that I recommend. I was drinking it after my plane flight to Canada. I
mm,
found it really, really helped. You just have to titrate it. So you mix it with normal spring water to make it around 120, 110, or whatever it is, not medical advice.
mm,
Stephanie Stack drinks it. I asked her this question when our podcast finished,
mm,
and she goes, "Oh, I'm drinking it right now out of my
mm,
coffee mug." So if she's doing it, I'm definitely going to be doing
mm,
it. I just think it's very expensive. So you
mm,
have to think if you're someone that's sick and you're wanting to use something like deuterium depletion, um, maybe you're better off reducing your work hours instead and
mm,
just laying in the sun or just purchasing grass-fed meat instead of like soy-fed meat or
mm,
something. So really pick your battles of what you can afford in your routine. I'm not one to tell someone to go buy $500 water. There's definitely better ways to do it. But if you want to experiment with it, be my guest.
mm. yeah, I mean that makes sense to me. I mean, you don't want to be because deuterium's not inherently bad. You just have to be having it in the right concentrations. Um, and then my last question, this is actually like this is for my friends because two of my best friends study physics at university. So
Mhm.
I'll definitely send this your response to them. But they've always
Oh,
wondered
no.
why is it yeah why is this whole field of study why is it called like quantum health? Why is it quantum health, quantum biology, quantum biophysics? Because they study quantum mechanics and quantum physics at uni, so they're wondering what the link is between what like yeah I guess they're wondering what the link is between what they're studying like quantum physics and then this whole like circadian health paradigm.
Yeah. Um, that's a great question. I think that when you start to understand like quantum physics
Hmm.
and then you start to look at how our biology actually functions, there's a lot of similarities there. And if you think if this is how the world actually works, then how is it impacting my biology? And quantum essentially means light at its most
Hmm.
basic fundamental. So we're really looking at the way that light impacts our health. And I mean, we talk a lot about like seed oils and we talk a lot about light and grounding, but something that's not spoken about as much because I guess it's a lot more esoteric, but I love to talk about it.
Hmm.
I mean, we were talking about it before we started recording,
Hmm.
was like this quantum entanglement piece and how you can kind of think about someone and then all of a sudden they're ringing you. Like I was speaking about Sam before to you and he texted me at the
Hmm.
same time. Um, and just the way that the world works through more of like a quantum lens. We look at the double slit experiment and things like this, and then we kind of figured that out, that
Hmm.
our mental state and our cognitive bias. I mean, science knows this, is why they can't repeat experiments. It dictates the outcome of our life.
Hmm.
And we kind of worked that out and we thought, that's interesting. And we put that in a box and we taped it up and put do not open.
Yeah.
And then we just we went
Hmm.
about our life um, as per usual because there seems to be so much happiness found in predictability. And when you realize that predictability comes down to the individual, then there's a lot more questions than we would like and a lot more unanswered questions than we would
Hmm.
like. And so I think we just kind of shut it away and we don't really talk about it too much. But in terms of quantum, when you start to look at these things like, okay, how does my thoughts interact with my reality to create what
Hmm.
I experience? And even looking for more of like a science level in the electron transport chain, there's now evidence to show that electrons don't actually like jump at all
Hmm.
from complex to complex. They actually quantum tunnel.
Hmm.
And they might just disappear and come back. And we don't even know how the body works on
Hmm.
this level. Um, but it's really looking at how those quantum principles that your friends are learning in physics
Hmm.
apply to biology. And I guess that's why it's called quantum biology. But we don't really get into these topics too much. I know that Cameron loves to get into them more so, and Sam,
Hmm.
but I guess in the mainstream quantum biology, they're just really talking about light at the moment.
That's a great answer. I'll definitely tell my friends that because yeah, it is really interesting how it's like the bridge between quantum physics and biology. Um, but yeah, I mean, this was such a good episode. I feel like we spoke about a lot of issues and we really went in depth about it. So yeah, thanks for coming on, Kiera.
No, you're so welcome.
Mm.
I think a lot of my friends are starting to advocate for, I mean, Cameron says we need to stop calling it quantum because it's not
Mm.
quantum, it's just how our body works. Like, this is
Mm.
just how it is. Like, we got it wrong, and this is just how biology actually functions. So I found that quite interesting. But thanks for having me on. It was so lovely to meet you and chat. Let me know when this is all out and I can share it for
Yeah,
you.
it's been such a privilege, honestly. So yeah, where can our listeners find you?
Awesome.
And
So I'm on Instagram. I'm not really
mhm,
that active anymore, but it's Kiera Lea Wellness. And then I'm on X as well, which is just Kiera L Wellness. And yeah, I post a ton of free information. And I've been uploading to Substack as well. So if you love to nerd out
mhm.
and you'd love to understand these topics more, you can come and jump over there and have a read.
Awesome. I mean, yeah, like I just hope everyone's learned a lot from this podcast, and it's been so great to have you on, and we'll definitely try to speak with you again at some point. But
Yeah, I have some new topics I'm researching, so
mm,
we'll have to come on and chat about them soon.
definitely. That's going to be a whole like different kind of worms, but yeah. But yeah, thanks everyone for listening. It's been such a good episode, and yeah, thank you everyone for tuning in. If you enjoyed that episode of the Ancestral Cure podcast, please give it a like, give it a comment, and share it to your friends. Your support means so much to me here, and thank you all for listening.